as a woman who's been able to break through that CEO glass ceiling, very importantly as a proud Asian, and also someone who's spent some time understanding both at Avon and today at Grameen the real power and the impact of women's entrepreneurship. In my own personal journey, what you don't read in my bio are a couple of things. I am the proud daughter of Chinese immigrants. I grew up in a very traditional Asian household with all that comes with that, as I'm sure all of you know. Culturally, that mom and dad, my tiger mother. I'm also the product of a microloan, which most people don't know. My grandparents came from China, and when they got off the boat in America, they spoke not a word of English, had no money, they were clearly in poverty, and my grandmother, not my grandfather, was able to access a small microloan. There was no Grameen at the time, but she accessed a microloan. She knew how to cut hair, and so she started a little salon. One generation later, my father went to MIT. 2 generations later, two generations later, you can read my bio and my Wikipedia page, but it is all from that very, very important privilege of 2 generations ago, a hand up, not a handout, a hand up to a woman that can dimensionally change the life of a family, and I am living proof of it. I'm also a huge passionate woman about the power of women and the empowerment of the 500 million here and the billions around the world. One of my favorite statements was my friend Mukhtar Kent, the chairman and former CEO of Coca-Cola, when he said that the most powerful emerging market in the world is not a country. If it were a country, it would be right here where we're standing. But the most powerful emerging market in the world is not a country. The most powerful emerging market in the world is women. Yes, women are still disadvantaged. They are still underserved. They do not receive the same financial capital. In the United States, $1 out of $23. 4% of dollars going to entrepreneurship in the United States of America in 2016 went to women. 4%. Hard to believe. But when we look at healthcare, when we look at education, equal pay, it is 78 cents on a dollar for the same job in the United States of America. That is up 1 penny from 77 cents several years ago, but it is still 78 cents on a dollar. So to equalize this, like Cherie, I believe it is the world's biggest game changer. McKinsey actually did a report, and they said that closing this gender gap, this wage gap, this societal gap, would add $28 trillion to the world's GDP by 2025. $28 trillion. So it's mathematics, women, and then here it's just simple math. It's the only way for societal progress. As an Asian American, I faced a lot of interesting things on my journey. I'll tell you a little bit about it, but I can tell you that 25 years ago, even when I had risen all the way to the top, I would walk into rooms in the US, Asia, Latin America, and Europe, and often people would say to me, expecting not a young 39-year-old Asian American woman, they would say, why don't you just wait here, and when your bosses come, we'll start the meeting. And I very nicely and respectfully had to say, that's fine, we can wait for them, but I am the boss. So life has changed, progress is getting better, and I am a believer that the glass is half full. When I graduated from college and started my career, I felt like I had to make a choice between doing good and purposeful work and getting a job. I actually wanted to go to the Peace Corps, and my parents told me, that's very nice, we admire your desire to serve, but you need to pay back those loans and you need to get a real job. So when I finally, years later, got to Avon in the early 90s, I found, luckily, that life could combine both, and that it was a company that, in fact, had a legacy of empowering women for centuries. Just a few minutes on Avon, because most people think of Ding Dong, the Avon lady, lipsticks and skin cream, but actually in 1886, 34 years before women could vote in the United States of America, the prescient founder of Avon, who was a man named David H. McConnell, believed that there was an opportunity not only to sell cosmetics, but to have women as the sellers, and this was way before they could vote. He was an encyclopedia salesman. All direct sellers at the time in America were men. He went door to door selling encyclopedias, and one holiday someone gave him a little vial of perfume and said, maybe the women will want to buy all of those volumes if you give them a free perfume with the purchase. So when he knocked on those doors, two things. The women said, we don't want the books. Can we just get the perfume? We'll pay for it. And number two, can we sell? And so again, 34 years before the right to vote, he gave women the opportunity to earn economic income apart from their husbands. It was rather heretical at the time. Many were against it. But therein began what was a revolution of women's economic independence. And so 140 countries later and 7 million Avon ladies later, that really was the legacy of the company. I had no idea I would become the CEO when I joined. There were no role models. There were no women in the Fortune 500 who were CEOs. But I do remember that I interviewed with, and now here is an industry of cosmetics where 95+% of the consumers were women and men were still leading the company. 8 CEOs, all men. But the CEO that I interviewed with for a middle management marketing job had a plaque behind his desk, and it had 4 footprints in the sand. And the first footprint was of a barefoot ape, and the second footprint was a barefoot man. The third footprint was a wingtip shoe, and the fourth footprint was a high-heeled pump. And the plaque said, the evolution of leadership, and this was in the early 90s. And I didn't even have the job yet. And I remember asking him, do you really believe that? That's quite a prescient and incredible plaque. And he said to me, you know, we sell cosmetics. All of our Avon ladies are out there all over the world. Someday we should be one of the first companies to have a woman CEO. I had no idea. I didn't even have the marketing job yet. But 6 years later, when I did get the job, after he had retired, a package came to my office, wrapped in paper with a big bow, and it was the plaque. And to this date, it sits behind my desk. I had the greatest opportunity. Let me just end with a few of the words that people have said to me, some of the advice I have been given. So these aren't mine. These have been mentors and advisors who have really helped me on that journey all these 20 years, in the hopes that perhaps it can inspire you or that it would help you as you journey forward. The first was, I had a woman tell me, follow your compass, not your clock. When you listen to my bio or you read it, it sounds like everything was straight up the trajectory and I got that CEO job at a very young age. But actually, 2 years before I became the CEO, I was promised the job and the board took a different direction. They decided that at 38 years old, I wasn't ready because I hadn't been a CEO, but how can you be a CEO if no one gives you the chance? And they put a CEO male from the board into the role. And there was a big expose about that in the New York Times that said there's a glass ceiling, women can't get to the top. And from that article, I was actually offered 2 CEO jobs. And this mentor of mine said, but you love Avon, you love what it's about. You were never all about just getting the title in the corner office. Follow your compass, not just your clock. Do what's in your heart, not just in your head. It's a long journey, and you have to have passion for work. Life is too short. There's no great life without great work, and there's no great work without great purpose and passion. So I stayed. I turned those jobs down. 17 months later, he did not succeed. He failed in the job, and I got the job and became the 9th CEO and the first woman. And the rest is history, but I did follow my compass, not my clock, and it made all the difference, not just in my work, but in my life. The second piece of advice I was given, which I think I tell young people all the time, this is a world where industries are getting disrupted overnight. And you have to reinvent your companies or your businesses. But people are the reinvention. Companies can't reinvent themselves. Only leaders can reinvent. So the advice I got was the following. Fire yourself on Friday evening and then rehire yourself on Monday. If you lost your job on Friday and they brought in someone new on Monday morning, would he or she do something different? Would he or she look at your very same role with fresh eyes, be able to walk away from those sacred cows, look at things that perhaps you've become a little stayed in because you've been there a long time? That's what a new person would do. But if you can do that, because you've got all the experience and all the history, then you will constantly not only reinvent yourself, but you'll be the catalyst to reinvent your business, small or large, even if you decide to leave it and go to another industry. That constant forcing of self-reinvention is one of the tools and one of the most salient pieces of advice that I have gotten in my career. The third I got from my very good friend Steve Jobs at Apple before he died. I had the pleasure of working with him for several years, and he said to me two words: fail forward. Everybody talks about Apple and all of the extraordinary successes. It's the #1 market cap company in the world. But they have made many mistakes, and they are proud of some of their mistakes, because from each of those mistakes, they learned, they got better, and some of the biggest successes came from some of the biggest mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, he used to say, then you're not bold enough, you're not courageous enough, and you're not innovative enough. If you make the same mistake twice, or don't use that as a learning opportunity for your whole team and your whole company, then shame on you. But if you make a mistake and can learn from it, the biggest successes will follow. So fail forward. Fourth piece of advice: do good, not just do well. That it's a long journey. It's not just about profits and shareholders in business. Yes, they are important, but they are only one constituent. If you can find work that has purpose, if you can find work and do good at the same time in the company or on the side, we can't wait for government. We as individual leaders have to take the reins and have to make a difference socially as well as business-wise. So make sure you do good as well as do well. And then finally, last but not least, be the first, but never be the last. People used to say to me, it's wonderful that you've been the first woman in your family to make it that far, or you're the first Asian American to become a CEO in the Fortune 500. But I always say to myself, so what good would that be if I was the last? What good would it be? And that is, I guess, the purpose of this forum, of all of you sitting here this morning and throughout this day, is that it is upon all of us to make sure that people stand on our shoulders, that we are, if we're the first, definitely not the last. So I leave you with 3 questions. If not here, then where? If not India, I mean, the world is betting on India. You are making such extraordinary change at a dizzying pace. So on this issue of powering the 500 million, on all of these issues that still remain in terms of women's empowerment, fix it here. You can do it faster than anybody else. If not here in India, then where? If not when? If not now, when? I don't want to see my daughter or your daughters or our granddaughters have to deal with the same things. As each of us walk out of here, it's just in the little actions. Every time you hire somebody, every time you promote somebody, are you paying that woman the same amount as the men in your companies, big or small? And in those little actions of every single one of us, that is where progress comes. We don't need laws, but we need to walk out of here. It's absolutely unacceptable, and the time is now. So if not now, then when? And finally, if not us, then who? Thank you very much.